Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Bill sent me a note about a story from WSVN down there in Florida about a woman who got a certificate of deposit for $10,000. And then later when she went into the bank, they said, we have no record of this. We have no record of this. So the question is, the $10,000 CD is missing from the bank? How is that possible? Patrick Frazier and Diana Rocha wrote this, and the woman bought a $10,000 certificate of deposit from a bank several years ago. Recently, she tried to cash it in and was told, we don't have any record of that. Can a bank lose your money? What do you do if they do? So she deposited the problem, as they say, with Help Me Howard and Patrick Frazier. Help Me Howard, of course, it's a reporter who looks into consumer issues on behalf of people who need help in the viewing audience. And I've always loved those kinds of reporters. I've worked with a few of them up here in Michigan. And in this case, the woman who put the money in the bank with the certificate of deposit is a realtor. And of course, she sells real estate and she makes videos about it. And she even writes books to help you sell your own real estate. And so she says that she does that to help people out. And of course, some of those people that she helps out might come back to her. So there you go. But back in 1997, when her son was young, she bought a CD to help pay for his college education. She said, I bought a CD of $10,000 from a local bank called Barnett Bank, and she packed it away and then she lost it. However, she recently found it. Bam. I was so excited I couldn't believe what I found. So she went into the bank because she's like, it's been 27 years. With the interest, it should be worth $39,000. $39,000. So she went to Bank of America because Bank of America had purchased Barnett Bank. So when she went in there, they said, oh, well, we have no records of this. The CD was purchased at Barnett Bank in 1997, which was then bought out by Nations Bank, which then merged with Bank of America. And by the way, right now I bank with a bank that's gone through 3 name changes in the last 5 years. And each name change, it becomes a larger and larger bank. And I'll stay with them unless they ever merge with Wells Fargo. But now in 2024, Bank of America says they've got no record of anything she ever had with Nations Bank or Barnett Bank with respect to this CD. She says, you trusted them with your money and the money magically disappears? So she still has the CD, the certificate of deposit. So interestingly, somebody at the bank said, well, you know, when you said you lost the CD, that wouldn't matter. You can always come in and get the money even if you lost the certificate. That's not vital to this. So it appears they're hinting that she shouldn't have waited. And so she got this thing in 97. That was a few years ago. And so they did ask, is it possible that somebody else cashed in the CD? And the woman says, I don't think so. And the bank has no record of anyone cashing it. They just have no record it ever existed. So she then checked with Florida's unclaimed funds in case one of the banks had turned it over to the state, and it wasn't listed there. And so she says that the bank still has her money, but they just simply say, we have no record of your certificate of deposit. And in case you're curious, that unclaimed funds thing I've always thought was kind of strange, because if people are in possession of something that belongs to somebody else and a period of time passes, depends on the state, depends on who the entity is that's holding the stuff and what they're holding, they're required to report that to the state. And after a period of time, they're required to give it to the state. And so if you put money in a bank account and leave it there and the account goes quote unquote dormant, they're required to let you know the account's going dormant, but then they can just notify the state and go, we've got a dormant account here. And the state goes, oh, then give us the money. And the weird part is I always thought that if I opened up a bank account and put the money in the bank and I'm still alive, I should be allowed to leave it there as long as I want. But that's not how the law works, and I'm a lawyer, so I have to admit that once in a while laws get passed that I disagree with. So here the question is, can a bank say they can't find your certificate of deposit? People at the TV station contacted their 7 News legal expert, Howard Finkelstein, who says they can say it, but in a court of law they have to prove it. If they have no record of the CD, they can't prove anything. So if the woman sues, she should win. So she should be able to walk into court, figuratively speaking, and say, here is a certificate of deposit. I've never cashed that in. I want my money. And they then have to prove or somehow counter the fact that she has a CD that appears to have never been paid off and was issued by a bank that they took over the assets and liabilities of a few years ago. So the TV station contacted Bank of America, and a spokesperson wrote back, says, we conducted a comprehensive search of our available records. We were unable to find any record confirming that Bank of America has or had the CD. In a letter to the customer, they said they keep records for 7 years. It is likely the account was closed more than 7 years ago. And the question is, do they really close an account after a few years on a certificate of deposit? Because that's the whole point, is you put the money in, you're usually required to leave it in for a period of time or you get penalized for taking it out. The other problem is it says we were unable to find any record confirming that we have it or ever had it. But did they search the records of the Barnett Bank, the original bank? So the woman says she's not going to give up. She says, I'm thinking of suing the bank, absolutely, because now it's about $40,000 they owe her. And if you have a CD in the bank, stay on top of it. Make sure the bank still has it. And when it comes time to renew, check to see if you can get a higher interest rate in another bank. And so you might want to, let's suppose you've got a CD, and it's a 5-year CD, certificate of deposit. If you leave it in, the interest can keep accruing. You might want to just go in and just say, hey, can I just roll this over into another one so you've got a newer one? Now, of course, the interest rate is substantially lower, and you want to keep the higher rate. You may have to think about this, but the point is that you want to stay on top of it one way or the other. Also, with the unclaimed properties, keep that in mind. You always want to check to make sure there's not something out there floating around. What's surprising to me is how many people have told me that they've checked those unclaimed property websites in their state and discovered that there was some money there that they had no idea it even existed in the first place. And quite often, for instance, let's suppose that you were a member of a class action, right? And you forgot about it, because most class actions are you get 39 cents and a coupon good for a half off a set of floor mats for your car. And so you weren't exactly expecting a windfall. And I've heard from people who say, Steve, I got a check for $139. That's a substantial amount in a class action, right? But if they can't find you and that $139 check doesn't get cashed, that might get sent over to the state as unclaimed funds. And so I've had people tell me that there were some decent amounts of money over there in their name that they never even thought about because they weren't really aware of it. So the point is that if you get the certificate of deposit, stay on top of it. And this woman here, the $10,000 CD, which is now worth about $40,000 if the interest gets tacked on, she's going to unfortunately have to sue the bank for it. And the bank is going to have to explain how it is that a small bank is here, gets bought by another bank here, and it gets merged with this bank here. Those records have still got to exist. And by the way, I'm not sure if you've ever had this experience before, but there was a time I had a bank account with a bank that folded, an actual bank that went belly up and like a bankrupt corporation, got taken over by the feds, and their assets and liabilities were then given to another bank. I don't know if they purchased them or how that worked out. All I know is I had a checking account at this one particular bank back in 1991 or 92, and I had an account there, and I remember hearing something in the news about trouble there, and all of a sudden, boom, one day the doors are locked and the place was closed. And it was all over the local news that this local bank, and they had a few branches, but it wasn't a big bank, had gone belly up. And when a bank gets in a situation like that, of course, they're insured by the FDIC. I didn't have so much money in the account that I ran into trouble getting my money covered. And sure enough, a little while later, I was told that, oh, by the way, you now have an account at this bank over here, and they've got your account. And I forgot which bank it was. I did not stay with them for very long. But the point is that banks do occasionally go under or get merged. And as I mentioned before, right now, one of the banks that I use, it's a decently sized bank. They've got branches everywhere. They're handy. And I've actually liked working with them. But they bought another bank that had bought my original bank. And so here I am with this other bank. So the banking industry is unusual, but these records should exist somewhere. And if I had to guess, if somebody walked into my office and said, Steve, I bought this CD 20 years ago, the bank says they've got no record of it. My first guess would have been that somebody else cashed it or that it was declared abandoned. But here they say that neither of those things happened that they can show. They just say we have no record of it. And now I'm wondering about what kind of good bookkeeping they're doing as they transferred the assets from one bank to the next. So, Bill, thanks for sending it from WSVN. Patrick Frazier and Diana Rocha wrote that. $10,000 certificate of deposit is missing from the bank. What'll happen? Questions or comments? Put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards.